I found my husband and my sister in our marital bed. It was the day I died and was reborn as a woman no one ever imagined I could be. Hello, my dears. I'm Theodora Hamilton, 87 years old today, and I'm going to tell you a story I've kept deep in my heart for many years. Before I begin, if you're enjoying this video, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing my stories reach so many different places. It was 1956. I was only 25 years old when it all happened. Cherry Creek was a small town in Vermont where everyone knew each other and secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. Even so, my husband Gerald and my sister Beatrice managed to hide what they were doing behind my back. Gerald was a respected man in our community. Tall, with black hair always neatly combed, and a smile that seemed sincere. When he walked into a room, people noticed. He had inherited a small grocery store from his father, which, through hard work and some important connections, he transformed into a prosperous coffee import business. People said we were lucky. Me for finding such a hard-working husband, and him for having such a dedicated wife. We met at the opening celebration of the town's new square. He brought me a glass of lemonade, and we talked all night about books and dreams. 6 months later, we were married in a simple but beautiful ceremony at the town church. My sister Beatrice was my maid of honor, wearing a light blue dress that Mom had sewn especially for the occasion. She was 19 at the time, 5 years younger than me, and we had always been very close, despite our differences. While I was the studious one, a teacher at the local school, Beatrice was the dreamer who wanted to see the world beyond Cherry Creek. Our parents had already passed away, Dad from pneumonia when I was 18 and Mom 2 years later, from a broken heart, the neighbors said. I cared for Beatrice as if she were my own daughter, using my teacher's salary so she could finish her studies. The first 3 years of marriage were happy, or at least I believed they were. We lived in a pretty 3-bedroom house on Main Street, with a porch where I liked to grade my students' notebooks on Sunday afternoons. Gerald worked a lot, frequently taking trips to negotiate with coffee producers or to find new buyers in larger cities. Beatrice lived with us. There was nowhere else for her to go, and Gerald never objected. Your family is my family now, he would say, hugging me. She helped around the house when she wasn't busy dreaming about the big cities she saw in the magazines she bought with the money we gave her. Things began to change in the 4th year. Small changes that alone might not mean anything, but together formed a picture I should have seen earlier. Gerald began taking more trips, a week in New York, 3 days in Boston. He always came back with gifts for both of us, a silk scarf for me, a French perfume for Beatrice. I started noticing looks between them, conversations that stopped when I entered the room, a hand touch that lasted a second too long, but I pushed these suspicions away. It's your imagination, Theodora, I told myself. Gerald loves you, and Beatrice is your sister. They would never do this to you. In the summer of 1956, Gerald bought a small country house about half an hour from town. It was a simple but beautiful place, with an apple orchard and a view of the river. For the weekends, he said. But we rarely went there. Gerald always had too much work, too many meetings, too many commitments. I remember that Sunday as if it were yesterday. It was March. Summer heat still lingered, but heavy rain had been falling since morning. I had told Gerald and Beatrice I would spend the day at my Aunt Amelia's house, who was sick. Gerald mentioned he needed to go to Burlington for a meeting with coffee buyers coming from overseas. Beatrice said she would stay home since the rain had ruined her plans to visit a friend. I arrived at Aunt Amelia's around 9 in the morning. To my surprise, she was much better. It was just a passing ailment, she said, serving me a strong coffee. You didn't need to come in all this rain, child. We talked until after lunch, but seeing that she really was fine, I decided to return home early. The bus I took had to make a detour. The bridge on the main road was at risk of flooding because of the rain, so the driver followed a secondary dirt road that had turned into a muddy mess. It was a slow and uncomfortable journey, with the bus rocking and the passengers complaining. And it was precisely on this road that we passed by the property where our country house was located. We were on a curve when I saw Gerald's car, that dark green Ford he had bought the year before, and of which he was so proud. It was partially hidden behind some trees, but I would recognize it anywhere. My heart raced. Burlington was in the opposite direction. What was Gerald's car doing there? "I need to get off here," I told the driver, who looked at me as if I were crazy. "Are you sure, ma'am? It's raining hard, and there's nothing nearby." "I'm sure. It's a family emergency." I got off in the rain, without an umbrella, feeling the water run down my face and soak my navy blue dress, my best dress. I walked through the mud to the property gate. The gate wasn't locked, nor was the door to the house. I entered silently, leaving a trail of water and mud on the wooden floor. The house seemed empty, but then I heard it. Laughter. Coming from the main bedroom, a man's laugh I knew well, Gerald's, and the melodious, almost musical laugh of a woman, Beatrice's laugh. Perhaps I already knew what I would find. Perhaps a part of me always knew and simply didn't want to see. Even so, nothing could have prepared me for the scene I saw when I slowly opened the bedroom door. They were in our bed. The same bed that Mom and Dad had given us as a wedding present. The crocheted bedspread that my grandmother had made was thrown on the floor. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't see me standing at the door, wet from the rain, in shock. It was as if time stood still. I felt a metallic taste in my mouth. My heart was beating so hard that I thought they might hear it, but no. They continued in their own world, betraying not just a marriage, but the trust of a sister who had sacrificed so much. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. A strange calm came over me. Silently, I backed away. I closed the door without making a noise. I left the house on tiptoe, as if I were the intruder, not them. I returned to the road under that merciless rain and walked until I found shelter in a small country store. I sat on a wooden bench on the porch, watching the rain fall and washing away with it the naive woman I had been until that moment. There, on that simple bench, as I waited for the next bus, a new Theodora was born. A woman who would not cry for a man who didn't deserve her. A woman who would not forgive such a deep betrayal. A woman who would take justice into her own hands. That night, when I returned home, I found Gerald and Beatrice sitting at the dinner table as if nothing had happened. He asked about my aunt. She commented on the heavy rain. I played my part perfectly. I talked about Aunt Amelia's surprising recovery. I mentioned I had been stuck at her house because of the rain. I smiled, served dinner, and began to plan. For 3 months after that rainy afternoon, I lived a double life. On the outside, I continued to be the same Theodora, the dedicated wife, the respected teacher, the loving sister. Inside, I was a woman with a single mission, to prepare a revenge that would match the betrayal I had suffered. I woke up every morning at 5, prepared coffee for Gerald, packed his lunch, gave him a goodbye kiss as if nothing had changed. I smiled at Beatrice when she came down still in her nightgown, hair disheveled, saying she hadn't slept well. I knew the dark circles under her eyes weren't from insomnia, but from nighttime meetings when I was supposedly asleep. At school, I taught the children with the same patience as always. "Mrs. Hamilton has sad eyes today," little Johnny said once. Children notice what adults pretend not to see. I replied that I was just tired, but the truth was that I was studying, observing, gathering information. First, I needed to fully understand Gerald's business. He always kept finances separate from me. "I don't want to bother you with numbers, my dear," he would say when I asked about the coffee business. Now I understood why. It wasn't just to protect me, but to hide his secrets. I started slowly. A casual question at dinner about the price of coffee. An observation about Colonel Mendenhall's new car, Gerald's biggest client. A comment about tax inspectors visiting the Thompson store, our neighbors. Information came in drops, and I collected it patiently, like someone putting together a complex puzzle. I had to be careful. I knew that in a small town like Cherry Creek, walls had ears. If anyone suspected what I was planning, it would reach Gerald's ears before I could act. So, I created a routine to disguise my investigations. On Wednesdays, I said I had teacher meetings and left school later. In truth, I went to the neighboring town, Lake Crossing, where the bank Gerald kept his accounts was located. I befriended Mrs. Clyde, an elderly lady who worked cleaning the bank. She always saw me sitting on the bench in the square across the street, feeding the pigeons, and would come to chat. Gradually, I gained her trust. "My husband works so hard," I commented once. "Did you know he's expanding his business? He's going to open a branch here in Lake Crossing." "Is that so?" "I haven't seen your husband around here lately," replied Mrs. Clyde. "I only saw him that day when he came with that pretty young lady, your relative, isn't she?" My heart froze, but I kept smiling. "Ah, yes, my sister Beatrice. They must have come to resolve something about the business. They must have gone to the safe deposit box too, because they took a long time," she commented innocently, not knowing the bomb she was dropping in my lap. That's how I discovered that Gerald and Beatrice came regularly to Lake Crossing, not just for their love affairs, but to move money in an account I knew nothing about. Little by little, with information gathered from Mrs. Clyde and observing the documents Gerald carelessly left in his home office, I put the puzzle together. Gerald wasn't just a coffee merchant. He was a tax evader who kept 2 sets of books. One official, shown to tax inspectors, and another real one, hidden even from me. The diverted money went to a secret account in Lake Crossing in the name of a distant cousin, who had died 3 years earlier. Since no one knew the cousin had died, the account remained active, fed by the dirty money from Gerald's business. And there was more. Through conversations with the son of the town's tax inspector, one of my students, I discovered that Gerald paid bribes to avoid detailed inspections of his warehouse. "Dad says Mr. Hamilton is very generous," the boy said innocently one day, when we were talking about what parents did. At home, I began searching for documents. I took advantage when Gerald went out on business. Now, I knew that many of these trips were to meet Beatrice at the country house or in hotels in neighboring towns. I carefully searched his office, photographing documents with a Kodak camera I bought especially for this purpose, always leaving everything exactly as I found it. It was during one of these searches that I found, hidden behind a loose floorboard in the office, a diary. It wasn't Gerald's. The delicate, rounded handwriting belonged to Beatrice. My own sister documented her betrayal, not out of remorse, but as if collecting trophies. Details of her meetings with Gerald, plans for the future, a future without me. Entries dated 2 years back. The betrayal had begun much earlier than I imagined, almost since Beatrice had come to live with us. The diary mentioned a planned trip to Buenos Aires, where they intended to start a new life with money from the secret account. "Theodora will never suspect," one entry said. "She's too good, too naive. She thinks the world is like her books, where good always triumphs. She doesn't realize that some people simply take what they want." Those words, written by my own sister's hand, burned me inside. The pain of betrayal gave way to cold determination. I photographed every page of that diary, keeping evidence of what they planned to do. The next step was to create my own financial security. I started saving part of my teacher's salary, hiding the money in a box buried in the garden, under the rose bush I had planted when we moved into the house. It seemed little compared to the amounts Gerald moved, but it would be my insurance if something went wrong. In parallel, I befriended Mrs. Carmen, widow of the former sheriff and now manager of the post office. An intelligent woman who had suffered much at the hands of her late husband and who looked at me as if she knew exactly what I was going through, although I had never said a word about it. "You know, Theodora," she said to me one day as we were having tea on her porch, "in this town, men think they can do whatever they want, but we women have our own ways of doing justice." It was Mrs. Carmen who helped me establish a post office box in my name in Lake Crossing, where I sent copies of all the incriminating documents I found. "You never know when we'll need insurance," she said with an enigmatic smile. At home, I continued my performance. I smiled at Gerald when he said he needed to travel again. I asked Beatrice about her outings when she returned from a supposed meeting with friends. I prepared special dinners on Sundays, where the three of us sat at the table like a united, happy family. Under this surface of normality, the plan was taking shape. Each day brought a new piece to my puzzle. Each night, lying alone while Gerald supposedly worked late at the store, I refined my strategy. What surprised me most during this period was discovering my own strength. I, who had always been considered sweet and submissive, discovered in myself a determination and strategic intelligence that even I didn't know I possessed. The pain transformed into clarity, the betrayal into purpose. One night, when Beatrice was already asleep and Gerald had not yet returned from one of his business meetings, I sat on the porch of our house with a cup of tea. The full moon illuminated the garden, and I could see the rose bush under which my little treasure was hidden. I looked at the starry sky and knew I was ready. I just needed to choose the perfect moment. And it came 2 weeks later, when I discovered that Gerald and Beatrice were planning to take the next step in their plan. They had booked passages to Buenos Aires for June 15th. They would take all the money from the secret account, money that technically also belonged to me as Gerald's legal wife. The chosen date was no coincidence. It was the eve of my birthday, as if they wanted to leave me one last cruel gift. Little did they know that the gift would be mine to them. The clock was ticking now. I had exactly 3 weeks to execute my plan, 3 weeks to transform 2 years of betrayal and lies into justice. At school, I requested leave for health reasons. "You do seem unwell, Mrs. Hamilton," said the principal, a good man who always respected me. "Rest as much as you need." That would be the stage for the first act of my revenge. And as I organized the final details, a strange calm came over me. It wasn't hatred I felt, but a quiet determination, the certainty that, after so long being manipulated, I would finally take back the reins of my own life. And so, in that spring of 1956, the sweet and naive teacher disappeared, giving way to a woman that no one, especially Gerald and Beatrice, would ever expect to find. If you've been following along this far, please leave your like and subscribe so you don't miss the continuation. The revenge is just beginning, and I guarantee you'll be surprised at what an apparently fragile teacher is capable of when doubly betrayed. June 10th, 1956, dawned with a clear sky and bright sunshine, as if nature wanted to witness what was about to happen. Only 5 days remained until Gerald and Beatrice's planned escape to Buenos Aires. And every detail of my plan had been meticulously prepared. I woke up early, as usual, and prepared a special breakfast: homemade bread that I had baked the day before, raspberry jam that Mrs. Wallace, one of my students' mother, had given me, and strong coffee, just the way Gerald liked it. I set the table with our best lace tablecloth, a wedding present from Aunt Amelia. "What's the special occasion?" asked Gerald as he entered the kitchen, adjusting his suspenders. "Nothing in particular," I replied with a smile. "I just woke up wanting to prepare something special for us." Beatrice came down shortly after, still sleepy, hair tied in a scarf. She looked at the set table with some suspicion, but sat down and served herself coffee. "I have a surprise for you both," I announced as I spread butter on the bread. "We're going to have a party next week. To celebrate your 3 years as owner of the business, Gerald." I saw the look they exchanged, a quick glance but loaded with panic. In 3 days, they would be far away if everything went according to plan. "Oh dear, we don't need a party," Gerald tried to dissuade me. "It was just another year of hard work." "I insist," I replied with firmness, disguised as sweetness. "I've already invited important people. The mayor confirmed his presence, as did Judge Fonseca and Sheriff Richardson. It would be rude to cancel now." I deliberately mentioned the local authorities. I saw Gerald's face pale slightly. He swallowed hard before forcing a smile. "If everything's already organized, but you could have consulted me first." "I wanted to make it a surprise. You always work so hard for others. You deserve to be celebrated." That morning was the first move in my chess game. I knew Gerald and Beatrice would now be in panic, trying to decide whether to advance their escape or stick to the original plan. Whatever the decision, I would be prepared. After breakfast, Gerald rushed off to the store, and Beatrice said she was going to visit a friend. I waited 15 minutes after she left and took the bus to Lake Crossing. I had an important meeting at the bank. The manager, Mr. Mitchell, received me with the deference he always reserved for the wife of an important client. "How can I help you, Mrs. Hamilton?" "I need to make a withdrawal from the joint account I have with my husband," I explained. "We're organizing a surprise party to celebrate his business success." I mentioned a considerable amount, not enough to raise suspicions, but sufficient for my purposes. Mr. Mitchell hesitated for just a moment. "It's usually your husband who makes the transactions, ma'am." "Yes, but as it's a surprise for him, and I'm sure everything is in order. After all, my name is also on the account." I smiled, maintaining eye contact. "Unless there's a problem." The manager looked uncomfortable, but eventually gave in. After all, my name really was on Gerald's official account as co-owner, not the secret one, which I hadn't mentioned yet. With the money safely in my purse, I headed to the post office. Mrs. Carmen was already waiting for me. "Is everything ready, Theodora?" she said, discreetly handing me an envelope. "The letters will be sent early tomorrow, as we agreed." I thanked her and put the envelope in my purse. Inside were confirmations that my anonymous complaints had been received by the state tax authorities. Detailed complaints about tax evasion practiced by Gerald Hamilton, coffee merchant in Cherry Creek, with supporting documents attached. I returned to Cherry Creek in the early afternoon and stopped by the town hall, where I was received by Mayor Wilson himself, a jovial man who had always appreciated me since I taught his children. "What a pleasure to receive you, Theodora. We're looking forward to the party next week." "Actually, Mayor Wilson, I came to make a small adjustment. The party will be tomorrow night. Gerald insisted on moving it up because he received news that some important buyers will only be in the region until Thursday." The mayor seemed surprised, but not bothered. "Tomorrow, well, no problem. I'll be there with Mrs. Wilson, of course." I repeated the same story to Judge Fonseca and to Sheriff Richardson. They all accepted the change, demonstrating the respect they had for our family. Few knew they were becoming key pieces in my plan. Upon returning home, I found Beatrice in the living room, nervously leafing through a magazine. She seemed relieved to see me. "Where have you been all day, Theodora?" Gerald called several times looking for you. "I was taking care of the party preparations," I replied casually. "Speaking of which, we have a change of plans. The party will be tomorrow night, not next week." I saw her face lose color. "Tomorrow? But why?" "Some important guests can only attend tomorrow." "Gerald didn't tell you?" "I spoke with him earlier on the phone." It was a lie. Of course, I hadn't spoken to Gerald, but I knew that neither he nor Beatrice would admit to not knowing about each other's plans. "Ah, yes, he mentioned something, but I thought it was just a possibility." "No, it's confirmed. In fact, I'll need your help with the preparations. Could you go to Mr. Jeremy's store and pick up the drinks I ordered? I've already paid for everything." Beatrice hesitated, clearly wanting to speak with Gerald first, but she couldn't refuse without raising suspicions. "Of course, I'll go right now." As soon as she left, I went to the telephone, not to call Gerald, but to call the National Bank in Lake Crossing. Using the name of Gerald's deceased cousin and the information I had collected, I made a transfer. All the money from the secret account, the fruit of years of tax evasion and shady business, was sent to a new account opened weeks earlier in my name, in a bank in the state capital. It was a calculated risk. If something went wrong, Gerald would discover my betrayal before I could complete my plan. But the years of silent observation had given me knowledge of every detail necessary to execute that transfer. The bank employee suspected nothing. When Gerald came home that night, he seemed tense. He went into his office and closed the door, something unusual. I could hear him on the phone speaking in a low voice, probably trying to understand why the party had been moved up. maybe even trying to confirm if the secret account was still intact. I prepared dinner as if nothing was happening. A roast chicken with potatoes, his favorite dish. Beatrice helped me silently, casting nervous glances at the closed office door. "Is everything okay, sister?" I asked innocently. "You seem worried." "No, just tired. It was a busy day." Dinner passed in tense silence, broken only by my attempts at casual conversation about the next day's party. I detailed the preparations, the guests, the special menu that would be served. "It will be an unforgettable night," I stated, looking directly into Gerald's eyes. "One of those nights that changes everything." After dinner, I retired early, claiming exhaustion from the preparations. In truth, I needed to finalize the last details. In my room, which I hadn't shared with Gerald for months due to his work nights, I organized all the incriminating documents. I separated them into envelopes addressed to each of the authorities who would attend the party. Different documents for each one, like pieces of a puzzle that, when put together, would reveal the full extent of Gerald's crimes. I slept little that night. I woke before dawn and began the final preparations. I hired Mrs. Josephine's catering, the best in town, to serve the party. I decorated our house with flowers and ribbons. Everything should appear to be a genuine celebration. Around noon, Gerald appeared at home, his face tense but trying to hide it. "Theodora, I think we need to postpone this party. An urgent commitment has come up in New York. I need to travel tonight." I remained calm, although I knew exactly what was happening. He had discovered that the money from the secret account had disappeared and was now trying to flee before the consequences of his actions caught up with him. "Impossible, dear. Everyone has already confirmed their attendance. The mayor, the judge, the sheriff. It would be an unforgivable slight to cancel now. I'm sure your commitment can wait a day." I saw the conflict in his eyes. Canceling the party would mean offending powerful people in town. Attending would mean delaying the escape. He didn't know it, but whatever his choice, my plan would follow its course. "All right," he finally yielded. "But we'll have to talk after the party. There are important matters we need to discuss." "Certainly," I agreed. "After the party, we'll have much to talk about." The following hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Beatrice avoided being alone with me, always finding some task to do in another room. I noticed her growing nervousness as the time of the party approached. At 7 in the evening, I put on my best dress, a navy blue model that I had bought especially for the occasion. I pinned my hair in an elegant bun and put on the pearl necklace that had belonged to my mother. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman who stared back at me. It was no longer the naive Theodora of before. It was a woman about to take back control of her own life. The first guests began to arrive punctually at 8. The mayor and his wife, Judge Fonseca, local merchants, family friends. Gerald, dressed in his best suit, assumed the role of the perfect host. Although I could see the sweat on his forehead and the way his eyes constantly sought Beatrice, who circulated among the guests in a red dress, discreet but elegant. At 9 o'clock, when all the important guests were already present, I asked for everyone's attention for a toast. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to me, standing in the center of the room, a glass of champagne in hand. "Dear friends, I thank you all for your presence on this special night," I began, my voice firm despite my racing heart. "We are here to celebrate not just success in business, but also to reveal truths long hidden." I saw the look of panic in Gerald's eyes. He took a step in my direction, but it was too late. The moment I had planned for months had finally arrived, and what happened that night forever changed the course of our lives. That night in June 1956, with all eyes fixed on me, I felt a strange calm envelope me. There was no turning back now. Years of lies and betrayals would be exposed before the entire society of Cherry Creek. "We are here to celebrate not only success in business," I continued, keeping my voice firm, "but also to reveal truths long hidden." The room fell into a sepulchral silence. I saw Gerald try to approach, panic visible in his eyes, but the mayor was between us, preventing him from reaching me in time. My husband, I proceeded, built his reputation as an honest and hard-working man, the image of an exemplary merchant, a dedicated spouse. I made a small pause. Unfortunately, the reality is quite different. At that moment, I handed Judge Fonseca, who was beside me, an envelope. Here, Your Honor. You will find documents detailing how Gerald Hamilton has systematically evaded taxes for the past 5 years. Another envelope was handed to Sheriff Richardson. And these prove the bribes paid to state inspectors to avoid inspections of his warehouse. Finally, I handed a third envelope to the mayor. And here, Mayor Wilson, is the evidence that my husband falsified documents of municipal land ownership, including that where he built the country house, which he uses not for business, but for illicit encounters. Gerald's face had lost all color. He looked around, like a cornered animal, seeking an exit that didn't exist. Beatrice, standing near the kitchen door, dropped the tray she was carrying, the crash of breaking glasses echoing in the shocked silence of the room. But the most painful part, I continued, my voice now faltering, not from weakness, but from the emotion contained for so long, wasn't the financial crimes. It was discovering that the man who swore to love and honor me had been betraying not just his wife, but all the trust placed in him by this community. Gerald finally found his voice. Theodora, you don't know what you're saying. These documents are forgeries. Someone is trying to harm me. Judge Fonseca, who had already opened his envelope and was examining the papers with increasing gravity, raised his eyes. These seem quite authentic, Mr. Hamilton. I recognize your signature on each of them. And these contain details that only someone very close to your business could know, added the sheriff, examining his own set of documents. The mayor seemed the most shocked of all. Gerald, these are extremely serious accusations. If confirmed, and they will be confirmed, I interrupted, because they're not just papers, there are also witnesses. The manager of the National Bank of Lake Crossing, for example, will confirm that Gerald maintains a secret account in the name of a deceased cousin, where he has deposited money of illicit origin for years. At that moment, I noticed that Beatrice was trying to discreetly leave the room. And as for you, sister, I said, my voice now laden with a sadness I could no longer conceal, are you going to flee as you plan to do tomorrow? All eyes turned to Beatrice, frozen by the door. Yes, I know about the tickets to Buenos Aires. I know about the plan you two had to escape with money that doesn't belong to you. Money that rightfully belongs to the state as unpaid taxes and to me as a legally married wife. The silence in the room was so dense that we could hear Gerald's heavy breathing. Mrs. Wilson, the mayor's wife, brought her hands to her mouth in shock. Colonel Mendenhall, Gerald's biggest client, moved away from him as if fearing contamination. Gerald tried one last card. Theodora is disturbed. She's been imagining things, creating fantasies. That's when I pulled Beatrice's diary from the small purse I carried. Fantasies like these, written by my own sister's hand? I opened the diary to a marked page and read aloud. Gerald says that as soon as we transfer the money to Buenos Aires, we can finally be together without needing to hide. Theodora will never suspect until it's too late. The words hung in the air like a sentence. Beatrice sobbed, her face contorted in a mixture of shame and anger. Gerald seemed to have aged 10 years in minutes. Sheriff Richardson cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the scene, but fulfilling his duty. Mr. Hamilton, I'm afraid you'll have to accompany me to the station to answer questions about these accusations. This is absurd, Gerald shouted, his face now red with anger. You can't believe her. She's trying to destroy me out of jealousy. The documents speak for themselves, replied Judge Fonseca coldly. And we can easily verify the authenticity of all this. That's when Gerald completely lost control. With an abrupt movement, he grabbed my arm forcefully. You viper! What did you do with the money from the account? Where did you transfer it to? His desperate question was the final confirmation everyone needed. It was no longer the word of a betrayed wife against a supposedly innocent husband. It was the involuntary confession of a cornered man. Sheriff Richardson and two other men quickly advanced, separating Gerald from me. "This only makes your situation worse, Hamilton," said the sheriff, holding him firmly. As they took Gerald outside, he shouted threats and accusations. The party that was supposed to celebrate his business success had transformed into the stage of his public disgrace. Beatrice remained motionless, tears silently streaming down her face. When our gazes met, I saw no remorse in her eyes, only anger, and perhaps a little fear. "And what about me?" she finally asked, her voice almost inaudible. "You didn't commit any financial crimes, at least none that I know of," I replied, exhaustion beginning to take over me after the adrenaline of that moment. "But I suggest you leave this house today and this town, if you have any sense." The guests began to discreetly withdraw, murmuring among themselves. Some cast looks of pity at me, others of veiled admiration. In a few minutes, the house that had been the stage of so many lies emptied. I stayed alone in the room among the remains of the party that never really happened. Half-full glasses, untouched plates of food, disarranged chairs. I sat on a sofa and, for the first time since I discovered the betrayal, allowed myself to cry. They weren't tears of sadness for the loss of a marriage or a sister. They were tears of relief, of liberation. The weight of lies and betrayals had finally been removed from my shoulders. The next morning, the news of Gerald Hamilton's arrest spread through town like wildfire. They said the sheriff found more incriminating documents in his office at the store, confirming everything I had reported. They also said that Beatrice had left on the first bus to the state capitol, taking only a small suitcase. I remained at home, receiving only Mrs. Carmen, who came to bring tea and solidarity. "You were braver than many, Theodora," she said, squeezing my hand. "Few women would have the strength to do what you did." In the following weeks, the investigation into Gerald's business revealed even more irregularities. It was discovered that he had mortgaged our house without my knowledge, using the money for speculative investments that failed. Evidence was also found that he adulterated the quality of the coffee sold, mixing inferior beans with premium ones, which he charged premium prices for. The trial took place 3 months later. Sitting in the courtroom, I heard Gerald plead innocent, accuse me of setting him up, of revenge out of jealousy, but the evidence was irrefutable. He was convicted of tax evasion, document forgery, bribery of public officials, and commercial fraud. The sentence, 8 years in prison. As they took him out of the courtroom, our gazes crossed one last time. There was no more love in those eyes, not even the desire I once thought he felt for me. Just a cold, calculating hatred, but I no longer cared. That man who once swore to love and protect me had become a stranger. With Gerald in prison and the couple's assets frozen to pay debts and fines, I had to start from scratch. I went back to teaching full-time. I rented a small apartment near the school, using the money I had secretly saved during my months of planning. The money from the secret account that I transferred. I didn't touch it. After consulting a lawyer in the capital, I understood that legally that money should go to paying taxes and fines. So, I anonymously informed the authorities about the existence of that account. It was a difficult period. People looked at me with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Some mothers removed their children from my class, fearing that the betrayed teacher might be a bad influence. Others ardently defended me, seeing in me a symbol of female resistance. Gradually, life found a new rhythm. I dedicated myself entirely to teaching, finding in children the joy I had lost. On weekends, I began to frequent the library of the neighboring town, seeking books I didn't have time to read before. I discovered a passion for literature that I didn't know I possessed. 1 year after the trial, I received a letter. The handwriting was Beatrice's. I hesitated a lot before opening it. Inside, I found a brief and dry request for forgiveness, more formal than sincere. She said she was living in New York, working as a secretary. I didn't respond. Gerald never wrote to me. I learned, through the lawyer who handled our divorce, that he blamed me entirely for his ruin. In his distorted mind, I was the villain who destroyed his perfect future with Beatrice. This version of the story probably comforted him in the cold cell of the state penitentiary. Time passed, and wounds began to heal. At 28, I was a divorced woman in an era when that carried a stigma, but I was also respected for the courage to face corruption and betrayal, for not having remained silent when it would have been easier to pretend nothing had happened. In 1958, I was invited to take over as principal of a school in the state capital. It was an opportunity to start anew, away from the whispers and glances of Cherry Creek. I accepted without hesitation. And it was in the capital, at a conference of educators in 1959, that I met Augustus, a gentle widower, a history professor, with kind eyes and hands that carried books instead of secrets. Our romance was slow, cautious on my part. The fear of a new betrayal shadowed each new step, but Augustus was patient. "Time reveals the truth of people," he would say, "and I'm willing to wait as long as necessary for you to see mine." We married in 1961, in a small, discreet ceremony. We began a life together based on mutual respect and the honesty I never knew with Gerald. Augustus never asked me details about my first marriage, and I rarely spoke about those years. It was as if that Theodora, naive and betrayed, was another person, a character from a book I read a long time ago. In 1963, our daughter, Eliza, was born. Holding that little miracle in my arms, I silently thanked for the strength I found to break with a past that could have destroyed me. Augustus was the loving father I always knew he would be, and we built a family based on true love, not on lies and betrayals. As for Gerald, I heard he served his sentence, and upon leaving prison, moved to Los Angeles. According to rumors, he lived modestly, working as a salesman in a department store. The man who once dreamed of wealth and power ended up living in the obscurity of an ordinary life. The years following my move to the capital were of reconstruction. With Augustus by my side and our little Eliza bringing joy to our home, I finally knew what a true family was, built on foundations of respect and genuine love. In 1966, we had our second child, Henry, completing our happiness. Our life was peaceful and fulfilled. I continued as school principal, now recognized as one of the best in the city. Augustus became a university professor, publishing books on American history that were adopted in schools across the country. The children grew healthy and intelligent, bringing us the serene pride of seeing our efforts rewarded. For years, I had no news of Beatrice beyond that single letter received after Gerald's trial. It was as if that part of my past had been sealed, stored in a chest that I had no interest in reopening. On the rare occasions I thought of her, it was with a mixture of dormant hurt and cultivated indifference. In 1970, on a particularly hot October afternoon, I was in the school office when the receptionist informed me that a lady wanted to speak with me. She didn't have an appointment, but insisted it was an urgent family matter. "What's her name?" I asked, without taking my eyes off the documents I was reviewing. "Beatrice Almeida," replied the receptionist. "She says she's your sister." I felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. 14 years had passed since I last saw Beatrice on that fateful night of the party that exposed Gerald's betrayals. For a moment, I thought about saying I was busy, that I couldn't receive her. It would have been so much easier to keep that door closed. But something within me, curiosity perhaps, or a remnant of a family bond that not even betrayal could completely break, made me decide differently. "Ask her to come in," I finally said, straightening in my chair and preparing for whatever came next. The woman who entered my office barely resembled the seductive and confident young woman who was once my sister. Beatrice was thinner, her face marked by lines that spoke of difficult years. She dressed with simplicity, almost poverty, but what impressed me most were her eyes. That defiant shine they always carried had been replaced by an expression of weariness and, I dare say, regret. "Hello, Theodora," she said, her voice trembling. "Thank you for receiving me." I indicated the chair in front of my desk. "What brings you here after so many years, Beatrice?" She sat down, her restless hands on the worn purse she carried. "I came to ask for forgiveness," she said simply. "I know it's probably too late, and I'll understand if you send me away, but I couldn't live any longer without at least trying." I remained silent, observing her. Part of me wanted to believe her words. Another part, the one that had learned the hard lesson of betrayed trust, searched for the deception behind them. "Why now, Beatrice? It's been 14 years. She sighed deeply. "Because only now did I have the courage." She hesitated, as if measuring her words. "And why?" "Because I'm sick, Theodora. I don't know how much time I have left." The revelation fell like a stone between us. I examined her face more closely and noticed signs I hadn't perceived before. The paleness under the discreet makeup, the hair too thin, that fragility that wasn't just emotional. "What do you have?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. "Cancer," she replied simply. "The doctors say I have maybe a year if I'm lucky." I felt a knot in my throat. Despite everything that had happened, she was my sister sitting there, the girl with whom I shared childhood, for whom I sacrificed part of my youth to raise after our parents' death. "I'm sorry," I said, and I realized it was true. "But I still don't understand why you're looking for me now. What do you expect from me, Beatrice?" She raised her eyes, facing my gaze directly for the first time. "Nothing, Theodora. I didn't come to ask for anything beyond your forgiveness, if you can give it to me. I spent years trying to run from what I did, convincing myself you were the villain of the story, that you had destroyed my chance of happiness with Gerald. But the truth always catches up with us, doesn't it?" "Yes," I agreed. "Sooner or later." "For me, it was when I was diagnosed," she continued. Suddenly, all the lies I told myself crumbled. I saw clearly what I had done. I betrayed my own sister, the person who always took care of me, who sacrificed so much for me. And for what? For a man who used me and discarded me as soon as things got difficult. Her words surprised me. "Gerald abandoned you?" Beatrice gave a bitter laugh. "As soon as he got out of prison. I waited for him at the gates, you know. I had saved money for years, working as a secretary, dreaming of the day we would be together again." She shook her head. "He didn't even stop to talk to me. He said I was part of the past he wanted to forget, that he had other plans." Now, a heavy silence fell between us. I thought of Gerald, of the man I once believed I loved, capable of using and discarding people like pieces in a game that only he seemed to understand. "Where do you live now?" I finally asked. "In a rented room near the hospital. I can't work regularly anymore, so I do what I can. Sewing, some private lessons for children in the neighborhood." I observed my sister, the knotty fingers that spoke of hard work, the simple but impeccably clean dress, the shoes worn from use. She had paid for her mistakes in ways I never imagined. "Why didn't you look for me before? When you got sick, or when you needed help?" Beatrice smiled sadly. "Pride, perhaps, or shame. Probably both. And fear, a lot of fear of facing what I did, of seeing in your eyes the contempt I deserved. I felt something change inside me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was too early for that, but perhaps the beginning of an understanding, the seed of a possible reconciliation. "I have a family now," I said, indicating the photographs on the desk. "A husband, 2 children." Beatrice looked at the photos, a genuine smile lighting up her tired face. "They're beautiful, Theodora. You look happy." "I am happy," I confirmed, "more than I ever imagined possible after what happened." "I'm glad for you, really." She stood up, adjusting her purse on her shoulder. "I won't take any more of your time. I just wanted you to know that I deeply regret what I did and that, despite everything, I never stopped loving you, sister." As she turned to leave, something inside me moved. I couldn't simply let her go like that to face alone what lay ahead. "Beatrice," I called, getting up as well. "Where can I find you if I want to talk again?" Her face lit up with contained hope. She wrote down the address and telephone number of the boarding house where she lived on a piece of paper and handed it to me with trembling hands. "Thank you, Theodora, just for listening to me. It's already more than I deserve." After she left, I sat for a long time, the paper with her address between my fingers, thoughts swirling in my mind. That night I told Augustus about the unexpected visit. He listened to me with the patient attention he always dedicated to my words. "What do you want to do?" he asked simply when I finished. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to help her. Another part still feels the pain of betrayal as if it were yesterday." Augustus held my hands in his. "Forgiveness isn't something we give to others, Theodora. It's a gift we give to ourselves. It frees us from the weight of resentment. It allows us to move forward in peace." His words planted a seed that germinated slowly in the following weeks. 3 Sundays later, I took the children to meet the aunt they never knew existed. We found Beatrice in the small room she rented, a clean but Spartan space, decorated with some plants in colorful pots and 1 or 2 simple paintings. It was a strange encounter, laden with contradictory emotions. The children, with the innocence only they possess, quickly became enchanted with this new aunt who told fascinating stories about their mother when she was young. Eliza, then 7 years old, was especially captivated, declaring at the end of the visit that Aunt Beatrice had the same eyes as Mommy, only sadder. That first visit paved the way for others. Gradually, a new relationship began to form between us. No longer the innocent intimacy of shared childhood, nor the blind trust prior to betrayal, but something new, built with caution and honesty. When Beatrice's condition worsened, I made a decision that surprised many, including myself. I invited her to live with us. Augustus, with his characteristic kindness, supported me fully. "Our house is too big for just 4 people," he said, "and family is family, with all its defects and wounds." The last 6 months of Beatrice's life were spent in our home. At first, she protested, insisting she didn't deserve such generosity, but the growing fragility of her body gave her no choice but to accept the help offered. They were difficult months, but also months of healing. During the long afternoons when we sat together in the garden, while the children played and Augustus worked on his new book, Beatrice and I slowly rebuilt the bridge that had been destroyed by betrayal. She told me about her life after leaving Cherry Creek. The years of struggle in New York, the precarious jobs, the nights of regret. She spoke about the monthly visit she made to Gerald in prison, bringing small gifts she could barely afford, feeding a dream that would prove empty. She confessed that when he finally got out and rejected her, something broke inside her, not of love, but of illusion. That's when she truly began to see the mistake she had made. In exchange, I shared stories of my new life with her. How I met Augustus, the birth of the children, the small and large joys of daily life that I had built from the ashes of my first marriage. One night, a few weeks before the end, Beatrice held my hand with surprising strength for someone so debilitated. "I want you to know something, Theodora," she said, her voice now almost a whisper. "You were stronger than I will ever be. When I think of the woman who planned that perfect revenge, who had the courage to expose the truth publicly, even knowing what it would cost, I admire that woman. You transformed betrayal into strength, while I allowed myself to be consumed by it." "We were young," I replied, feeling the tears I had held back for decades finally run free. "We both made mistakes." "Yes, but you learned from yours. I wasted years blaming others for my own choices." On the morning of May 12, 1971, Beatrice departed peacefully, holding my hand. Her last request was to be buried in Cherry Creek beside our parents. I respected her wish, making the long journey back to the town I had left behind so many years ago. Cherry Creek had changed little. Some new houses, a renovated square, more aged faces. I was received with respectful curiosity, the teacher who had unmasked her corrupt husband and now returned to bury the sister who had departed in disgrace. In the small cemetery, under a sky of an intense blue that Beatrice had always admired, I bid farewell to the sister who had betrayed my trust and, in the end, found the way back to my heart. Standing before her simple coffin, covered with wildflowers that she loved, I felt the last vestige of bitterness leave my body like an old fever, finally yielding. Forgiveness, I realized, doesn't erase the past, doesn't undo the damage caused, nor eliminate the pain felt, but it opens space for life to continue, for new stories to be written, for love, even wounded, even transformed, to find ways to survive. As for Gerald, I never saw him again. I learned years later that he had died alone in a small apartment in a Los Angeles suburb. I felt neither joy at the news nor sadness, just the quiet certainty that that chapter was definitely closed. My life followed its course. The children grew up, graduated, built their own families. Augustus and I aged together, sharing the sweet complicity of those who chose, day after day, to build a story based on mutual respect. When he departed, 7 years ago, he took a piece of my heart with him, but left me surrounded by the love of the family we built together. Today, at 87, I look back and see not just the betrayed young teacher who found the strength to take revenge, but also the woman who discovered that the true victory is in rebuilding oneself, in allowing oneself to love again, in finding within oneself the capacity to forgive. Betrayal leaves scars, my dears. That is undeniable. But it's our choices after the pain that define who we really are. We can allow resentment to consume us, as almost happened with Beatrice. Or we can use it as fuel to build something new and better, as I tried to do. If there's one lesson I'd like to leave with you today, it's this: life rarely follows the path we plan. There will be betrayals, losses, moments of despair when the ground seems to disappear beneath your feet. But there will also be new beginnings, chances of redemption, people who will enter our lives to show us that it's worth believing again. And in the end, what matters isn't the blows we suffer, but how we choose to get up after them. True strength isn't in revenge, however just it may be, but in the capacity to move forward, to rebuild, to allow the heart, even wounded, to remain open to the love that will certainly come. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey of memories. If my story touched your heart in some way, leave your like, share with someone who might need to hear these words, and subscribe to the Grandma's Diary for more life stories. Until next time, my dears. And remember, as long as there is life, there is always the possibility of a new chapter.